sorry to keep you from your eggs and your grits. I never did quite get grits. I love the American South, but grits and me don't mix. I'm really pleased to be here in this magic city. The first time I visited Birmingham, Alabama was on the 13th of January 2010. And I didn't know at that point that it was actually called the Magic City. Though I had something of a magical experience when I was here. I met people from 3 giving circles. I was touring with Lynetta Gilbert, who most of you will probably know. At the time, Lynetta was working for the Ford Foundation. And I'd been asked by the Ford Foundation to evaluate her program. And we did a kind of whistle-stop tour of about 10 grantees in the US South over about 10 days, and it was really hectic. I remember coming into Birmingham at a lunchtime, and we met a group of people from giving circles. And as I said, what they said to me was absolutely magical and has stayed with me ever since in the group. Basically, people are saying, actually, what's the difference between community philanthropy and regular non-profits? And in saving my bacon, save some for me, by the way, in walks Rita Thapar. And Rita comes from Nepal, and she is the founder of an organization called Tewa. And Tewa, it was a women's fund, is a women's fund, but it transformed into a community philanthropy. And what she did in Nepal, which is a very poor country, many people live on the breadline, war-torn, conflict-ridden, the basic infrastructure doesn't work, the water table is rising, it's an environmental catastrophe. She got 3,000 local people to give money towards this foundation, which is actually transforming the way that people think about the conflict in Nepal. And what she's doing is actually supporting young people who are victims of war to actually become peace builders. So that when she said all this, the room completely changed, because she is putting her own money into this venture. And her colleagues, 3,000 of them, are all putting regular contributions into Tewa. It's a game changer. It's something that really makes a difference. So my second message to you, which is not only are you important doing something transformative, you are also not alone. What you people are doing is actually mirrored in many different parts of the world. And I have experience of bringing together a person from Siberia and a person from Sinai Desert. It couldn't be more different. You know, one in Russia, one in Egypt, and they realized that what they had in common was that they were trying to build the assets of their respective communities. Similarly, a good friend of mine, Felicia Jones from the Black Belt Community Foundation, 2 years ago came to Nairobi, and she said, she's as an African American woman, she said to me, "Barry, I feel as if I'm home." And what she found in Nairobi as an African American was that the issues in East Africa are not that different from the issues in Alabama. There are, of course, differences in context, political, climate, and other things. But the issues of rural poverty, the issues of unsympathetic governments, the issues of trying to lift up people's spirits were very similar. And that was an amazing success, that visit, but on both ways, because there was mutual learning, because people were taken out of their immediate context and thrown into this situation. And I think the thing that really binds what you are doing with what is happening in Asia and what is happening in Africa is best expressed in the African notion of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu simply is, I am who I am because of who we all are. We are not singular beings on this earth. We connect in our relationships. So the third thing I want to say is that this idea is actually growing. The notion of Ubuntu is that as you do good things in your communities, this will have a ripple effect. And what is happening, and there's quite a bit of evidence, and I've been collecting it across the globe, is that citizens are stepping forward. They are finding the issues of climate change, the growing economic crisis, the tendency for governments to step back from issues and not deal with them, mean that citizens all over the world are stepping forward. And one of the statistical ways that is showing is in the phenomenal growth of community foundations across the world. Community foundations there are, roughly speaking, 70 new ones formed every year. And in Africa, there are now 21 or so, and they are really remarkable organizations. Since they've come from the grassroots, they don't conform to a kind of an organizational stereotype. They don't necessarily meet a Council on Foundations definition, but they have sufficient of the qualities of local asset development, people giving of their time, talents and treasure to those institutions, that they can be thought of as community foundations. And I've just been doing an analysis of those 21 community foundations, and if you look at their income sources, that 33% of those of the money is coming from individual Africans. That is a very powerful statistic, because there are very few non-profit organizations across the world that are able to get individual donations like that. This proves that Africans are actually doing for themselves. And it's actually a different kind of asset, because it's not necessarily about size. If you look at the amounts of money that are going into community philanthropy efforts across the world, the value is not in the amount of the donation. It is actually in the value of the contribution towards ownership of social and economic and political processes that build social change. And it's a counter for what tends to happen in development circles, which is what you might call the projectification of development, where large amounts of short-term money are injected from on high into areas without the consent or the participation of local people. So that when that money dries up, everything stops. And it is it is possible to do things differently. There is a story it's been written up. It's called The Story of the Well, and it's based in Makutano, which is in East Asia. And this was an area which was completely impossible to farm. It's far too dry, and you couldn't grow crops there. So the big issue was irrigation. Big problem was that the various villages in this area, they were at war with one another. There was quite a lot of conflict, quite a lot of disagreement. But through 14 years and $19,000 from the Kenya Community Development Foundation, that area, 83 villages, has been completely transformed. And the local people have done it for themselves. If a development agency had done that, it would have cost millions of dollars. Instead, it's small amounts of money using local people, local power, their time, treasure and talent.
So that's quite a different kind of asset. One of the problems around community philanthropy, it is completely not understood. People do not get it. It is invisible. We live in a world that is dominated by top-down technocratic solutions that experts know best. Well, actually, that is not not true. But we keep repeating that particular mistake. I've been talking to USAID and the Department for International Development in England, and they don't even have a category for community philanthropy. When I say what local people can do for themselves, they look at me as if I am from the planet Zog. You may think, yes, he looks a bit like as if he's from the planet Zog, but that is another issue. Jenny Hodgson and I wrote a short pamphlet some time ago, which if anybody's interested in, I can send to you, called Beyond the Poor Cousin, which is why community philanthropy is treated by the rest of philanthropy as a poor cousin. And I think part of our challenge is to actually flip that over and to make sure that community philanthropy is at the table and certainly not a poor cousin. The next thing I want to tell you is there is now opportunity for change. We used to have, this field used to be supported by the Ford Foundation. Unfortunately, no longer. They have moved on. However, the Aga Khan Foundation, US, and the Mott Foundation, based in the Aga Khan US is based in Washington, and Mott is based in Flint, have actually decided to develop a program on community philanthropy across the globe, which it would be possible for you to be part of. And I've got a little pamphlet here that I wrote based on a consultation. I do have a few spare copies, but if anybody would like one, I can send one to you. And basically, we've got 5 prongs to that approach. One is we want to increase the learning about this field. What is it? What does it look like? What's its value? Can we begin to tell more success stories of this kind of work? The second, can we build the infrastructure, both globally and regionally and nationally, to actually support this kind of activity? Third, can we begin to develop a process of education of society to actually see the value of this, so that rather than being on the margins, what a smallish number of really good people do, to turn it into a mainstream type activity. And 4, to think about how we can get to scale without actually destroying the beautiful qualities of what it is we're actually trying to do. And I think that, just being with you for the last 12 hours or so shows me that the real beauty in what you have is about your peer relations, the equality between you, the sense that you learn from each other in different cities and areas of the US, but also that you are a network. And this shouldn't be just like any other network. This needs to be a living network, one in which people step forward and actually do things for themselves. And I'd like to think that we can actually work on this and begin to do it now. And I'm going to be consciously but unashamedly advertising a workshop at 9:40 this morning, immediately after the breakfast. You can bring the bacon in, which will try to involve you in the 4 stretch goals for the Community Investment Network. And then this afternoon we're going to run a peer learning workshop on growing individual giving circles, so that we can think about how to get smart growth into this field. Now, it seems to me that in a city like Birmingham. This is a really, for me at any rate, although I'm not American, it's a city that has a global significance, because when I was walking around the other day, and I was noticing on almost every street corner the struggles of the civil rights movement, and seeing that, feeling that that's a long time ago, yet it's still current. It's still there. It's all still there. There is no such thing really as history. And then by accident, coming upon the 16th Street Baptist church, and it just looked like a normal church, but I've never seen any photographs. I knew what it was. I just knew it. It was also almost like magical, and it seems to me that there's really something powerful in this city, something powerful in this moment around the world, where we're thinking about where this very week in Greece people are saying, actually, our society is collapsing. We are actually almost like the Weimar Republic. We could get the growth of fascism in Europe. That it's people like you that are the difference between a civilized society, one based on inclusion and equity, and that one that is based on disorder and chaos. And I'd like to finish with a quotation that all of you will have heard before, but I think it's particularly apt to you and where you are and what our task is. And it comes from Margaret Mead, and it's, "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you. I'm quite happy to take questions, Baker.
Yeah. So, clearly we know what Barry's favorite part of breakfast is this morning, but we do have 5-7 minutes, so if there's a couple questions in the audience that people have based on his remarks, I saw one hand back there. If you want to identify yourself.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Katrina Watson, and I'm here with the Birmingham Change Fund. And I greatly enjoyed your speech, and I'm glad that you are enjoying your time in Birmingham. My question is about how you referenced that community philanthropy is not recognized at the table. It's more of a second cousin. Can you talk about the underlying attitudes that exist, and how do we work toward actually preventing that underlying attitude? So not only getting at the table, but when we're at the table, being served properly.
That's a very good question and a very difficult one. One of the problems with much of organised philanthropy, not all of it, but many foundations are very elitist in their behaviour. They separate themselves from their grantees. They do not work alongside their grantees in the way that community philanthropists do, because most community philanthropies are actually activists as well, who work alongside the people that they fund. So they don't see themselves as separated by class. I think that what we have to do is not try to change the attitudes of those philanthropies, but actually just to do the work, is to grow what we can do, not worry about other kinds of people, but at the same time to use influential philanthropies like the Aga Khan Foundation and like the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, who actually get this and are trying to spearhead this. And we, through them, and I am trying to bring more donors into the field, is to get into a space where there is education, where we really, there is a message to philanthropists that we really are in this together. The process of the principle of Ubuntu needs to apply to everyone in society, and that includes the power elites.
Thank you for your comments about Birmingham. I mentioned to my table mates this morning that I was thinking as I was in the shower what a debt of gratitude African Americans owe to this city from around the country.
Yeah.
It never really hit me before until we had a chance to see the museum yesterday. So thank you very much for that. The second thing I was thinking was the bottom-up sort of, you talked about the sustainability of that and how important that is. And in addition to the foundations, I'm struck, and it may also be the community I'm in, the role that higher educational institutions play in this same drama. I mean, if they study one more community, one more time, with one more set of graduate students, I'm going to tear all my hair out. So I think that that they need to be brought into this discussion too, because if they even thought about making a project sustainable over 10 years, rather than every year something new comes in, I think we could see them as a partner and see some real change.
Thank you. I've got two things to say to what you just said. First, I couldn't agree with you more around higher education institutions. And I think part of the problem there is they have some of the elitist mindset that they see themselves separate from communities and tend to use them as laboratories. And I think we should work on the academy to do something about that. And the second thing I'd say is that I think it's not just the United States that's got cause to be grateful to the people of Birmingham. It's the whole world, because what happened here changed everything, and changed everything forever. We are living in an interconnected world, and what you do here and what happens in Asia and what happens in Africa and in Latin America is, and everywhere else in the world, is really critical. We really are in this together.
Good morning. Thank you for taking your time to come and speak with us today. My name is Tony Pickford. I'm with DAP, Denver African American Philanthropist. And Community Investment Network is relatively small, and you talk about growth in your speech, and you mentioned smart growth versus, it sounds like, just growth for growth's sake. I was wondering what types of ideas you have for smart growth strategies for an organization of this size.
To just enough organisation would be my answer. Is just enough organisation. And one of the things I like about the Community Investment Network is that it relies on its participants, not on its central staff. And that is the ethos that will carry it forward. There should never be a large centre, because if you get a large centre, it tends to dictate terms to the members. The members have to be involved every stage, and that they need to step up and to support the staff, and the staff should never substitute for the members. So that growth needs to be systemic rather than financial. And we're going to. This is the topic of the 940. I think it's 940 workshop that we're going to run on these issues. And as I understand it, the Community Investment Network has got 4 stretch goals. Well, that workshop is going to be about involving you in how those are actually implemented, rather than doing it to you from a high space. It comes back to the point of fighting elitism at every turn, because that is the enemy of growth. When people start thinking that they are more important than the problem that they solve. Ivan Illich, the South American revolutionary, tells the story of the watersheds, where he says, humankind realizes there is a problem like ill health. That's the first watershed. The second watershed is when you say, you guys, you come and become specialists to deal with people's ill health. That's the second watershed. The third watershed is when the doctors say, actually, we're more important than the problem, and our pay and conditions is everything. We done? Oh.
Good morning.
Hello.
My name is Lloyd Watson with Birmingham Change Fund, Vice Chair of the Community Investment Network. My question is a little bit more personal. How did you come into this work? How did you come into community philanthropy?
My whole life has been an accident. And a bit of a mess. I can spin a good tale, but I try. I've done a lot of different things. I've been an academic, and I was one of the academics that actually went to work in inner cities in the UK and saw firsthand the kinds of problems there, and recognised that the only people that could actually solve those problems were the local people, and that much of what was coming on high from government programs was often making things worse, and certainly not leaving, the inner cities with much, because all the money went into the pockets of people who had cars, who drove into the area in the daytime and left at night, and very little of the resources actually came into the pockets of people who lived there. And that kind of changed my life, and I had to give up academia and become a kind of activist ever since. But we can talk later about that. I can, because I'm older than you, my biography goes on forever.
So, again, join me in giving Barry a big... I was regretting standing up here when he made that comment about elitism being the enemy or whatever it was. So whoever took a note of it, at first I thought, be sure to email it to me, but this is also a chance to plug the social media squad. And for those of you who are on Facebook or on Twitter, put that up there for me to get later, but also throughout today and tomorrow. If you haven't heard, we are being more and more deliberate about being online and we talk so much about how we don't do enough documenting, and for all the things the internet is and is not, one thing that it is it makes it real easy as well as messy to be able to document real quickly. So that's why we're also live streaming all the things in here. So I would love, if you haven't found it in your program book, there's the hashtag for the tweaks, for those of you who know that parlance. And then really as CIN, first on behalf of really Valeda and Charles and the Give It Back Project from NGAT Charlotte, want to give Barry this one gift of the book, a signed copy. And then also on behalf, CIN, on behalf of the Heritage Quilters, is having Barry go home, fly back to Heathrow with a little bit different fashion than he came over here with.